Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. I'm IKLIMAH from 9 group. Here I will answer about assignment of discourse analysis, the second our assignments. Here I will answer about two questions. There are one and two questions. But before that, I want to say thank you to our lecturer who has given us this opportunity to answer these assignments. The question number one: why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Please explain your answer. The answer for number one is, according to the Merriam-Webster online dictionary, genesis is defined as the origin or the beginning of something. The point is, we previously discussed discourse analysis in part 1, where discourse analysis is a discipline knowledge who has a close relationship with another linguistics. But here there is a slight difference. According to the results of the study, there will be a little development that varies in the discourse interactions, but here is not explained in detail because there are still a few obstacles in preparing it. Therefore, discourse analysis is only discussed in general and related to linguistics. Therefore, we can define that discourse analysis is a study that examines the use of language by indigenous people, both oral and written, which is inspirable from the theories of linguistics. I think there is answer from number one, from the questions number one. The question from number one. I will jump to the next questions. That is number two. The question number two: do you agree with saying that the development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the developments of linguistic theories? Why? Please explain your answer for your position. I strongly agree with of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistics theories. Because why? Back again to their earlier understanding that I have explained that discourse analysis is research study on the use of both oral and written linguistics in which there is linguistics. This means that it will be related to linguistics. That means that it will be related to linguistic theory, where there is discourse analysis. Where there is discourse analysis, there is linguistics theory. I repeat it again. Where there is discourse analysis, there is linguistics theory. Because linguistic theory is one of the theories which gave birth to the discourse analysis itself. We can therefore conclude that linguistic theory is very influential for the development of discourse theory. I think that's it from me. Thank you so much for your kind attention, guys. Now I will invite my friend to answer number 3. There is FIFI Wulandari. Time is yours.
Thank you. Now I will continue to answer the question of discourse analysis, and I will answer the question number 3. And there are several questions here. The first is, what is traditional grammar theory? Traditional grammar theory is one of the stages of the development of linguistic theory that supports the emergence of discourse analysis as theory, which traditional grammar theory introduced and developed in 18th and 19th century in Europe. Traditional grammar theory, according to Smith, is theory of the structure and formation of the words or morphology and sentence or syntax, usually without much reference of sound and meaning. This question is, what is the main principle of this theory? Okay, the main principle of this theory is that grammars in this tradition reflects the prescriptive view that one dialect or variety of language is to be valued more highly than others and should be known for all speakers of the language. Question is, what do teachers who adopt the principle do in teaching a language? Teachers using prescriptive approach, that is language approach used to arrange and enforce the rules that governing how a language is used. The rules emphasize some important things such as spelling, grammar, or syntax. With this approach, teachers seek to teach how people talk and write and teach how to use the language. This question is, what are products of this theory? The products of this theory is published 270 grammars of English along with standard English dictionaries. This question is, what is the main shortcoming of this theory? The main shortcoming of this theory is in a prescriptive approach, because many of the language experts believe that teaching a language by using this approach is not strong enough to develop knowledge and skills, because it's limited to the language referred to standard language. That consequently makes learning language isolated by a standard language component. Well, the last question of number 3 is, what are grammar translation method and its relation to traditional grammar theory? Well, grammar translation method is a teaching method that emphasizes the translation and teaching of grammar. The relationship with traditional grammar theory is traditional grammar theory being reference or basis in grammar translation method, as well as the background for the existence of grammar translation method in language pedagogy. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much for the chance that has been given to me. Well, today I'm going to answer the questions regarding discourse analysis subject. I got number 4 for this chance, and the question is, what do you know of structuralism theory? Please explain your answer to the question by referring a few things like what is structuralism theory and what does the Saussure say about the structure of the language. And the second is, what are the main principles of this theory. The third is, what is informant method and what is relationship to the structuralism theory. The fourth is, what are the characteristics of the method. The fifth is, what is the main shortcoming of this theory. And the last is, what is error analysis and what is its relation to the structuralism theory. Well, I will answer for the first thing. What is structuralism theory and what does the Saussure say about the structure of language? So, being aware of the flows of the traditional grammar theory, some linguists began feeling dissatisfied with the theory because they thought that it blocked the way out. The way of further research of the language, and it eventually would cause negative effect on language development and the development of linguistics itself. And consequently, they began to look for an alternative theory to language study. And yeah, this took them out to find the structuralism theory, like that structuralism linguistics. And the term structuralism was firstly introduced by Swiss linguist statics Ferdinand de Saussure. He is the developer of a branch linguistic theory called that structural linguistic. And through his works in General Linguistics published in 1916, this theory focused on examining language as a static system of interconnected units. De Saussure argued that la langue, or language that we know, was formed by a sign, which finally produced parole, that is speech and utterance. An utterance here is then understood as any meaningful event that has been made possible and governed to the extent by a pre-existing system of signs. A sign has two components, that is signified and signifier. Signifying means that abstract idea or concept, while the signifier means that expressing the signified itself, or the perceived sound. In other words, the sign as the combination between signified and signifier to gain its meaning. Therefore, two different languages have different words to describe the same ideas or concept. So second is, what are the main principles of this theory? So if we look at the structuralism theory closer, we'll find out the following principle in this theory. That is, the first, structuralism puts spoken language to be the first place in written language. Second, and the second is, structuralism employs the descriptive approach, which allows learners to try to find unconscious rules that people follow when they say things like sentences without any prescribed and books to follow. And the third is, structuralism requires learners to learn language skills as a unified system as a whole. Therefore, they need a source of language components for imitation in order to build their skills in for language. So the third is, what is informant method and what is its relationship to the structuralism theory? Well, Blomified, the prominent linguist, who brought the principle of structuralism into ideal lingual methods. The method was sometimes called and known as informant method. So it was called informant method since it employed a native speaker of the language called as the informant, who served as a source of phrases, vocabulary, and who provided sentences for imitation. A linguist was also involved in implementing this method. So the linguist was on chair to supervise the learning and teaching process. The linguist knew nothing about the target language, but was trained to elicit the basic structure of target language from the informant. The learners with the linguist were allowed to take a part in guided conversations with the informant. The fourth is, what are the characteristics of the method? The characteristic of the structuralism theory, the method of that. So if we look more closely at this method, we will find out the following characteristic, like a language is what its native speaker says, not what someone thinks they ought to say. And the second is, drilling is a primary activity in the classroom, and then learning a foreign language is in need of habit using the language, which is initiated by mimicking, repeating the use of language components consistently until the learners feel natural to express everything they have learned in the foreign language. And then, yeah, teachers have to let his learners to practice the same sentences over and over again to gain familiarity with the sentences. And then, yeah, teachers' language is a model for the learners to imitate. And the last is communication skills will be attained after going through a long, boring, and repetitive process and rigorous drills. The fifth is, what is the main shortcoming of this theory? Well, with the application of this method, learners are expected to be able to speak a foreign language in accordance with the correct structures of the language. So they should speak by using correct patterns of the language. Therefore, in addition to teaching the correct sentence structures, teachers are also required to prevent students from making errors while speaking. So the last is, what is error analysis and what is its relations to the structural theory? So whenever an error is found, the teacher should be immediately corrected. This is done to avoid the fossilization of errors as a result of letting the students accustomed to making errors. In the era of structuralism, error analysis began intensively to be developed. It is done solely to provide information to teacher about the forms error often made by learners. The information is then considered as the support of the learners' problems in learning foreign language. The teachers are then obliged to correct such errors. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is KURNIAWAN from Group 9 and I will answer for the question number 5. What do you know of structuralism theory? Please explain your answers to this question by referring to these things. Okay, the first is, what is the functionalism theory and what does Chomsky say about language? Okay, functionalism theory is known as an approach to language study that is concerned with studying the function performed by language use. It views a language as a communication system consisting of components of form and function that must be learned by learners as a unified knowledge. And then Chomsky claimed that sentences in human language were not learned by imitation and repetition but generated from the learner's underlying competence. Okay, and then the next question is, what are the differences between Chomsky's view and Haim's about language? Okay, Chomsky views about language of competence is eventually recognized as linguistic competence, which deals abstract abilities speakers possess that enable them to produce grammatically correct sentence in language, knowledge of structure of language. However, Haim states that linguistic theory needed to be seen as part of a more general theory incorporating communication and culture. Okay, and then the third question is, what is the main principle of this theory? Okay, the main principle in this theory has been pushed by many researchers to examine aspects of the language function beside the language forms. This is done by analyzing the language discourse of both oral and written to find the purposes behind the use of certain utterance in communication. Okay, and then the fourth question is, what is CLT method? Okay, and its relation to functionalism theory. Okay, I will explain the CLT method is the competence, okay, which has developed by Haim's into a communicative competence. Hence, which is said that communicative competence is developed within sociolinguistics as subdiscipline of linguistics and widely spread okay, and widely spread around the world as the most recommended goal of language teaching. Consequently, language teachers and teaching institutions all around the world immediately begin rethinking and redesigning their teaching syllabus and classroom materials based on communicative approach, and it produce the CLT or communicative language teaching method. And the last question is, what the relationship between discourse analysis and functionalism theory? Okay, it relates in social and cultural aspects behind the language used by humans to communicate, okay, which has become an inspiration for some linguists to conduct research on discourse analysis. Okay, that's all for me, and thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.